Thanks everyone for coming along and joining us in this webinar where we're going to give you a bit of background on how we're going to be shaping the next round of the Community Data Lab. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Nicola Burton. I'm the Programs Architect for the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons. Let's get started. If I can, brilliant. So I'll begin by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose land we meet. So today I join you from the country of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to the custodians of the lands from which all of you join us. We are, spread across a vast and varied continent. So I'll start by giving you a little background on the ARDC. I think most of you will be pretty familiar with us by now, but just in case. So the ARDC is a capability that's enabled by the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Scheme. So these are collaborations between the federal government and other organisations that provide research infrastructure for Australian researchers that couldn't be provided by just one organisation alone. So you could think of something like a supercomputer, maybe a deep space telescope, that kind of thing. So there's a great many of these, as you can see here, but we are ARDC and we provide research data infrastructure for Australian researchers. So our mission is to accelerate research and innovation by driving excellence in the creation, analysis, and retention of high-quality data assets. So we have this concept of a research data commons in the ARDC. It comes from the idea of a commons as a way of collaboratively managing shared resources. And that's really what we're doing here. We want to find a way of bringing together the people and the skills and the data and the storage and the models and the compute, all those different aspects which collectively are the shared resources that Australian researchers need to do their research. So we have an acknowledgement that that set of resources looks a little different from discipline to discipline. And so we think about clusters of related fields of research. And for us, that is the HASS and Indigenous, so humanities, arts, social sciences, and Indigenous research data commons. And we always like to note here that this grouping is an interesting one. It's really based on the history of how the RDC came to be, that Indigenous research capability is linked in with HASS, because we acknowledge that Indigenous data and Indigenous research spans the full range of research disciplines. There's Indigenous medical data, there's Indigenous ecology data, but because of the way that we've come about, we combine these two areas. So we are the group within the ARDC that looks at data infrastructure for HASS and Indigenous research data communities. So we have a number of different areas that we work in under HASS and I. We have 5 focus areas which are really focused on providing, we have long, broad-scale, wide-scale projects which are focused on providing infrastructure for a particular community or data type or discipline. So we have Indigenous data, we have an Indigenous research capability, we have language data, we have government data for social sciences research. We have digital platform and social media data. We have creative arts data, and each of those is served by these long 4-year projects that are putting together these kind of constellations of infrastructure. And then we have a 6th focus area, which is connections, which is what this activity, the Community Data Lab, falls under. And that's, rather than being one of these long 4-year projects, we're looking at, in connections, about much more kind of short, sharp development of little pieces of infrastructure that hopefully serve the needs of a broad range of researchers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the Community Data Lab is a central part of the connections focus area. And the issue that we're trying to deal with here is that there's a lot of data out there for HASS researchers that comes from the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums space. And there are these other brilliant curated collections out there that would enable HASS researchers to do great research. But those researchers need the digital research infrastructure to enable them to use it. And often that's not been a part of their training. They haven't got that support. And so we need this infrastructure, but then there's this associated issue that the development of infrastructure for HASS tends to be tied to grant cycles that can be very stop and start. And so we end up with this kind of up and down development of infrastructure, but then it can't be maintained, which is a real problem. And then that is compounded by the enormous variability of HASS research. It's a very broad church. And so we have all these different needs, and how do we provide sustained infrastructure that meets all these needs, that enables people to make the most of this fantastic data that's out there? So we have the Community Data Lab as an approach to this. And the lab itself can be a bit of a tricky thing to get your head around. I had to go and talk to my colleague, Peter, who was able to help me get my head into the right place with this, because the lab isn't a place where you go to solve your problems. Instead, we think about the lab as like a research and development lab, or a factory that's producing these pieces of infrastructure that can then be used by researchers out in the world. So the Community Data Lab is a kind of a factory that fosters the development of tools and data sets and documentation that are going to enable researchers to use that data from the GLAM sector and from other collections. So what kind of things do we build in the CDL? I tried to find a stock photo of products coming out of a factory, and all I could find was cheeses, but I like cheese, so we're rolling with it. So what kind of things are coming out of our CDL factory? Well, we want analytics, and we want data collections, and those need to meet the needs of many HASS researchers and groups. And so one of the things that will come about because of that is that we're maybe not looking at supporting entire workflows, taking someone through the whole process of analysing that GLAM data. But what we're looking to do is to serve a part of that workflow. And that's something that can be picked up and adapted from researcher to researcher. We might not all do the same things with a particular kind of data, but we need to get it a certain amount of the way with the processing the same way across multiple disciplines. We're looking at things where we have really active researcher need and engagement. We want to be dealing with that GLAM data or curated HASS data sets. And what we're aiming to do is to produce open access outputs. And one of the great features of the CDL is that we're not just looking at producing these this collection of tools, analytics and data. We're also looking at developing a model for how HASS infrastructure more broadly can be developed that can survive that kind of stop-start cycle that's such a problem. So one of the really great outcomes of the first round of the CDL was a set of principles that kind of govern how we think about the kind of infrastructure that we develop, but that can be adopted for broader development of HASS infrastructure. And what we're really looking at is working out how we can create infrastructure that if there's breaks in funding, if it can't be maintained all the way through, it's not going to just fall apart, vanish, leave a gap. So yeah, there's a really great principles document that you can read, but some of what we're looking at is we're really looking for sort of infrastructure at rest. So things that don't require costly maintenance to keep them up. Separating the data from the analytics is great because it means that you don't end up with data that gets locked into a system that then becomes outmoded and suddenly we can't access any of it anymore. We're looking at platforms which rely on open access, commonly used systems so that there isn't that bespoke code that needs costly maintenance. Taking that core code and making it available as code libraries. So even if I can't continue to maintain my particular instantiation of this system, someone else can take what I did and put it up somewhere else. And we're looking at having that open source code and open access guidance documents so that, again, things can be picked up and reused. So what have we built in the CDL so far? So the CDL had a phase that ran over the last couple of years, which produced some really great outputs. We have the Trove Data Guide, which is a brilliant guide that takes you through the really rich data that's available from the NLA on Trove and shows you how to access it, what you can do with it, walks you through examples of how to use the API, how to do particular analyses with it. We have some tools which take you through common parts of workflows like stylometry or image annotation. And then we have things like notebooks which will allow you to do particular mapping analyses or particular visualizations. So those notebooks that can be picked up by anyone and used. So that's the kind of thing that we have developed and hope to continue to develop in the CDL. So now we get to what we're doing here today. So we want to build out another phase of the CDL. And so a bit of framing for that. At ARDC, we build our infrastructure in collaboration with partner organisations. So our funds come from the NCRIS scheme, and we have this requirement for co-investment with partners. So what we're trying to do is to find infrastructure that we can build that both meets researcher need, and we have potential partners out there who have the capability and interest to help us to build it. So our thinking coming into this, we've developed our own understanding of researcher need that's based on the consultation that we've done leading up to all of our other focus areas. We also had lots of needs that emerged during that first round of the Community Data Lab. And in general, the broad range of partners that we work with have been expressing a lot of needs for little bits of HASS workflows that need to be met. The way that we approached finding partners and starting to narrow down what we wanted to do, we started by last year having a call for a registration of interest from potential partners saying, you know, who's out there who might be able to help us build something in the CDL? What is it that you think you could build that researchers need? And we also chose to reach out specifically to groups who provide data analytics and research software support to HASS researchers at Australia's universities. So lots of universities will have a group of research software engineers, data analytics specialists, where researchers come in with their problems. And those groups have a really great insight into what HASS researchers need right now. And they also have the capability to build things. So seemed like ideal partners. And from those processes, we ended up pulling together a group of potential partners. And we had a series of roundtable conversations where people talked about the particular needs that they'd seen and the things that they currently have the capability to build, and started to kind of validate across organisations that, yeah, these are shared needs across Australia. And as a result, we now have a set of potential capabilities that we are looking to develop. And we're now at the stage of coming back to the community and checking, you know, are we approaching this the right way? And what is it that we need to do to build these out? So we have 5 new capabilities that we're looking to develop. And when I talk about a capability, that's a sort of a set of tools or services or an infrastructure that allows researchers to do a particular thing. So we have these 5 capabilities that we're investigating. So we have research tools and workflows for visualizing and analyzing data stored in RO crates. So RO crates are a format which pull together the data and then the metadata that describes it. It's a really great way of packaging your data for reuse. But we're interested in finding out, well, now that the data is in the RO crate, how can researchers be interacting with that data? We have a project for an easy-to-use curated national data set for public interest documents, such as Hansard. We're hoping to help researchers skip the lengthy, sometimes months-long process of taking those really interesting and important public interest documents that come from things like parliamentary proceedings, and avoiding having to go through the process of gathering all the data, formatting all the data. Yeah, it's a long process, and hopefully we can get people past that step. We have tools and workflows for extracting, processing, and searching text information from low-quality images of digitized documents and handwritten text. The kind of thing we're thinking about here is that you might have a collection where there are handwritten notes which contain information about the particular items in that collection. And that handwritten text has, yeah, great information, really hard to get that into a consistent digital format. So there's a group we're working with who are interested in producing some tools to help with that. We have a new national service that we'd like to pilot around the publishing of curated collections of websites. I think this is a really common thing in HASS research, that researchers as an output will curate a collection and present that as a website for others to explore and use. And maintaining those websites is difficult and costly and often just can't be done long term. And we risk losing brilliant research outputs as a result. So we're looking at addressing that problem. And then the last thing that we're looking at is a framework for recommended patterns in HASS software engineering. So when research software engineers are supporting HASS researchers with their research problems, how can they be producing things in such a way that they are reusable, that they follow some of these patterns and principles that we've talked about in the development of the CDL? So that's just what we're talking about now. We're hoping that the CDL factory will continue to run past this phase. So we have plans for further investment to follow. So while what we'll be talking about over the next lot of co-investment workshop, co-design workshops will be this set of potential capabilities. If you have ideas for other capabilities, please talk to us, because that might be something that we can bring into future work. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ellen, who will be leading the co-design workshops. She can introduce herself and take you through how co-design is going to run.
Thanks, Nicola. Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen. So today I'll give a brief overview of the ARDC co-design process for developing national research infrastructure. I know Nicola's already touched on it, but I'll just go into a bit more detail and just explain how you can get involved in shaping our 5 new capabilities. So ARDC uses a co-design model for developing and investing in infrastructure. In this model, we conduct extensive consultation to identify areas of opportunity and need in the research domain, and then work with the stakeholders in that domain to design the solutions and infrastructure. The intent of this process is to direct our investments to areas where we can create the greatest benefit for research. By co-designing infrastructure with the community who will use it, we can ensure that we are meeting the community needs. Co-design also contributes to the sustainability of our research infrastructure investment because it maximises the user base and builds community buy-in and support for that infrastructure. At the end of the co-design process, we aim to have a clearer understanding of the outline of the projects and who will be involved in the delivering team, ready to start developing a detailed project plan. So I think it's already shared the link to the co-design framework in the chat for those who are interested in reading further. But just as a summary, we follow 4 steps, which is problem identification, project shaping, project planning, and endorsement. We have already completed stage 1, where we've identified the broad problems we're aiming to address, identified stakeholders who can help us shape the solutions, and have found partners who have the expertise and capability to help us deliver the solutions. The next stage is where we open up for community input to help us to refine and shape these ideas. By consulting broadly across the sector, we are able to look beyond our own assumptions and be able to ensure that the capabilities we are developing are actually of value for researchers. So as Nicola mentioned, there are 5 new capabilities being explored. For each capability, we'll be holding 1 online co-design workshop using Zoom, where we'll be asking the community for feedback and input using Miro boards. Services work better if people who use them are involved in the development, and this is why we're seeking guidance from end users to help us develop these capabilities. Each workshop will be an interactive discussion and run for 1 hour and 50 minutes. Before the workshop, we'll provide a briefing note about the capability, and we just ask that everyone read this beforehand just so we can make the most of our time together, as each workshop has a lot to cover in a short period of time. And so why should you attend a co-design workshop? Co-design workshops will build on our understanding of the current problem and proposed solution. By attending and providing your opinions and feedback, you can contribute your use cases and experience about the capability, discuss the capability and the challenges it addresses with your peers, and help shape the capability that will be delivered for researchers. So in terms of the workshop structure, during each workshop, we'll start by introducing the problem that ARDC and its partners have identified. We'll also present the proposed solution right from the beginning, so you'll know what we're aiming to address and how we're proposing to address it. After the introduction, we'll pose a series of questions for you to answer. Participants will be divided into breakout rooms to reflect on their ideas and discuss with others in the group. We'll then be asking participants to add their feedback onto a Miro board. During the workshop, we will give a rundown of how Miro boards work, but if you do register for a session, we'll provide a sandbox Miro board for you to explore if you've never used Miro before, and it just gives you a chance to become familiar with the tool before coming along to a session. If you have accessibility issues with Zoom or Miro, please let us know before a workshop and we can provide alternative methods for you to provide feedback. So what type of feedback are we wanting from participants? We'll be asking a series of questions aiming to validate the problem statement and value of the proposed capability. We want to hear about your experiences related to the capability to make sure we are addressing the problem in the right way. After the workshop, we'll be sharing a survey that will have the same questions asked during the workshop. This will allow people to provide further feedback after the session and also allow input from people who are not able to make the workshop due to other commitments. There'll be a strict 2-week period where you can provide this feedback. We'll be summarising the workshop feedback in a published report, and that will inform the design of the project and the capability. We'll also be publishing a draft version of the project plans for further feedback. Now, just in terms of the workshops, I know Nicola has already talked about each of the capabilities, but I just want to recap each of them and highlight the intended audience. This will help you decide which workshops you should attend. Registration for each workshop will be via Eventbrite. Each workshop will start at 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time and run for just under 2 hours. So the capability for workshop 1 is an easy-to-use curated national Hansard data set to enable new and expanded HASS and Indigenous research. The intended audience for this workshop are researchers interested in working with Hansard records, including policy advisors and researchers working for public officials and those who support these researchers, and researchers interested in public inquiries and the submissions made to them, researchers interested in other public interest documents such as registers of interest, ministerial diaries, and freedom of information documents, and people who support researchers in their use of digital research infrastructure, including digital skills trainers and research support providers. The partners for this capability are the University of Queensland, UQ Digital Observatory and Queensland Cyber Infrastructure Foundation, or QCIF, and the date for this workshop is Tuesday the 25th, which is next week. The workshop is open for registration, and we'll add the link in the chat. The capability for Workshop 2 is a new national service to publish HASS and Indigenous collections as websites via a sustainable model that aligns with the FAIR principles. The intended audience for this workshop are HASS researchers who need to create a website to publish their data and document their workflows and/or tools, and for example, as an output of a project. Researchers who are interested in discovering data, tools, and guides that may support HASS and Indigenous research workflows, and those who support these researchers. The partner for this capability is University of Sydney, Sydney Informatics Hub, and the date for this workshop is Tuesday the 4th of March. The registration for this workshop and the following workshops are not yet open, but we will make them available on Eventbrite in the next few weeks. The capability for Workshop 3 is a framework for recommended patterns in software engineering when working with HASS and Indigenous data. The intended audience for this workshop are research software engineers and researchers who work with software and tools to support HASS research, and people who support researchers in their use of digital research infrastructure, including research infrastructure providers and digital skills trainers. The partner for this capability is the Australian National University, and the date for this workshop is Friday the 14th of March. The capability for Workshop 4 is research tools and workflows for visualizing and analyzing data stored in RO crates, which is a format that packages data alongside its metadata and linkage information. The intended audience for this workshop are researchers already using RO crates to store data and want to also use it to conduct research, and researchers working with data suitable for using RO crates but want to be assured of having tools to enable them to continue using their data for research in that format. The partner for this capability is MDAP, so Melbourne Data Analytics Platform, University of Melbourne, and the date for this workshop is Tuesday the 18th of March. And the fifth capability workshop is tools and workflows for extracting, processing, and searching text information for low-quality images of digitized documents and handwritten text. The audience for this workshop are researchers who are working with digitized documents with no or low quality or difficult to process text information, so such as handwritten notes attached to collections, and those who support these researchers. The partner for this capability is also MDAP, and the workshop is Tuesday the 25th of March. So just as a summary, there's one workshop per capability, and they're all a week apart. So the workshops will be discussion-based. We'll record the sessions to ensure we accurately capture all your input. However, the recordings will not be published, and everything shared during the workshops will be considered confidential. We'll publish a report at the end of the co-design process without attributing comments to specific individuals or organisations. Having community support behind this infrastructure ensures it serves its needs for the community, and it's incredibly important for the success. Your input will help us shape the project plan, which will be compiled into a report and made publicly available. The project plan itself will be available for public feedback, and all feedback will be compiled and reflected upon. We hope your input will make this infrastructure more useful and beneficial. Any input that cannot be incorporated now due to limited resources will be published and considered for further consideration. So thank you for your time. I'll now open up to any questions people may have. So you can either put it in chat or unmute yourself.
Right, took quite a while to find the button to unmute myself, but I should also note that we are recording this session and we will make it available online. So you're very welcome to put up your hand and ask a question verbally, but if you do so, you may show up in the recording. If you prefer not to, you're very welcome to use the chat instead. Okay, so we have a question, what data sets we'll be working with from the GLAM sector. The main data-focused project this time is the public interest data, so looking at parliamentary records. But we're hoping to expand out to a much broader range of GLAM datasets in following work. Okay, we have a question about the 25th of March session. Where it said on the slide that the partner was ANU, the partner is indeed ANU for that session. It looks like, unless I've missed any earlier questions, which Kit might be able to highlight for us. Oh, here we go.
There's another, yep.
I see a couple. Is there a location where I can look at the workshop schedule again to decide which one to attend? Yes, I think that is great. Ellen, do we have that already, or is that something that will be going up on the website shortly?
We're setting it up shortly, yeah.
Great. So we will send around to everyone who attended today a notification with information about where to sign up. Oh, look, we are negotiating with the Vic government and BDM to digitally read the full corpus of Victorian death certificates in the public domain. Interesting. We'll have a look at how that potentially relates to our current projects. Oh, okay, another question about the partner for the workshop on the 25th of March. Let's just pop back to that one and we will double check. Oh, yep, quite right. That was our mistake. That partner is indeed MDAP, not ANU. We will make sure that when we have the thanks for calling that one out. We will make sure that when we have the list of workshops that we will make sure that that's corrected. Now I will just pass back to Janet, who has some more details about her question. Janet, please take the floor. If you're able to unmute. That's Janet McCalman, who asked to speak. Okay, I guess, Janet, if you're having trouble unmuting, yeah, we'd be happy to follow that one up.
Here we are. Here we are.
Oh, great, you're here.
All right, here we go. Sorry, the sign was different. Melbourne Uni, Nick Carr from Currajong and ANU and various others, we've been negotiating for a long time to build an intergenerational linked data set from the Victorian birth, deaths and marriages. As already a pilot for doing that for all of Australia, these are the most important records of Australian people we have in the public domain. And we have, in fact, the best registration system of birth, deaths and marriages literally in the world, certainly in Victoria. And I won't go into the reasons for how that happened. We found finally, after many attempts over many years, that we can do it with AI, and Nick Carr has demonstrated that these handwritten records can be digitally rendered and that it looks as though it could be done within the existing IT infrastructure of the Registry of Birth, Deaths and Marriages. So it wouldn't involve, as similar projects in Scotland, for instance, have involved exporting all the data to a third party to work on it. So what I want to know is, who do we talk to in the ARDC? The Victorian government may need some joint funding. How do we proceed within your organisation? We've been sort of talking on and off, but what do we do now? Who do we speak to? Because obviously we're committed to this, and the Academy of Social Sciences decadal report on infrastructure put ours as the top priority of a national data set, from which you could then draw a huge number and connect a whole lot of other data sets leading up to the present day, and it would give PLEDA, which already exists, a genealogy. So not only can you do amazing historical and demographic work and social science work, you can also do epidemiology and medical work. So I'm just wanting to know where I go. I need a roadmap.
I think me. If you, I will message you with an email address, and we can talk about this. Feels like potentially, I'll talk to Jenny, but potentially an opportunity for the next round of CDL projects that we're scoping out. Although certainly that working with handwritten documents does feel like it would be great to have you along to the co-design session,
Yes.
which will be related to that, because it feels like there may also be requirements that you can help us set for that, which may help to benefit this work sooner.
Well, I think the AI breakthrough is quite recent, but it's Nick Carr I'll have to drag along because I can't talk to it. I'm an historian, but he's given us a demonstration. And it means that this huge data set of records, which in other projects around the world where they've done this, and that's Sweden and Montreal and Utah with the Mormons, and now Scotland, it's all been done by hand, transcription, over many, many years. Now, we can do this possibly in a matter of weeks with AI. Now, this opens up for the whole country. We could have a historical register of the Australian people, and we certainly in Victoria, through another project I was involved in, be able to tag Indigenous people. And I know Marcia Langton is very supportive, because this means that not only have you got the Indigenous records in their own archives and collections, but you then also can see Indigenous people within the context of the white society that's colonised them. So if you want to understand things about life expectancy, for instance, you need to be able to see that in the context of the sort of communities that they could possibly compare with, which would be poor whites in the society. So that's the work we've done, but we can now tag Indigenous people in partnership with the Indigenous Data Commons.
Yeah, that sounds.
Nick Carr also works on. So Nick Carr is involved with both projects.
And I think it would be brilliant for us to have a follow-up conversation to see how we can support. But I think also, yes, it would be great to have you along to the session looking at is it workshop?
There's 5, I think.
Workshop 5. It'd be great to have you along there, because I think it really demonstrates exactly what we're aiming for in the CDL, because I think that some of the work, one of the use cases that team were talking about was, well, you have these handwritten notes in the collections of herbaria where, you have all of the information there. And it's so interesting to see that the same kind of problem around this handwritten information shows up in a completely different area of research. So hopefully by getting these, it's really about kind of creating these modular tools that plug into a part of a workflow that can really answer quite a different research question.
Well, I think so. Well, you've got, most of the historical records about people are handwritten. So the convict records are handwritten. And you can read them, and we need some skill, but I did a huge project on Tasmanian convicts with a big team. We had to make sure that we had old people doing the research because they could read copperplate. Sorry, all the young ones missed out. But look, in our deeper history, our 19th century and early 20th century history is all handwritten. And so if we can have a breakthrough on this opens up an entirely new world to historical research and humanities research. And you've got, therefore, also archives of writers, which is all handwritten stuff. So in every domain, if we can crack the handwriting problem, then we've got the capacity to really bring our national record of human existence on this piece of land to the hands of the researchers and the public.
Thank you. I'm just going.
We've got another question in the chat.
Yes, I just saw. So, okay, a couple more macro questions. To what extent do these developing HASS research investments deliver IP and resources to private sector providers of data infrastructure or university partner labs? What scale of investment in the community lab is envisaged? And where does the usability and access testing of these outputs get evaluated? These questions relate to the value terms and accountability methods for the projects as they unfold or get delivered. Okay, so I'm going to, I might end up throwing to well, I may have colleagues who have something to add, but our budget is in the scale of, what do we have? 2.5 million over 2 years. I think that's the ballpark, but someone can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. Not tiny in scale, but smaller definitely than our other focus areas projects. Our intention is that all outputs from these projects be both to be openly available to Australian researchers wherever possible. It may be that in some cases the maintenance of a service that's being run might require some kind of cost recovery in the long term, but in terms of the IP that's developed, the intention is for that all to be open access. So for code to be made available in code libraries. The intention is not to create IP for private providers, although we may look to private sector providers to help us to develop some of this infrastructure. But yes, very much the aim is for code and what underlies what we're providing to be reusable itself. In terms of usability and testing, we will be looking to build that into the development of each of the projects. And so you may see that show up in the draft project plans as work packages, where each project will describe how groups of users will be identified and at what point they'll be providing feedback on the utility of the outputs. That's definitely something that we're looking to get feedback on both during co-design and also at the project plan feedback stage. Are there other questions that I've missed, Kit, that I should respond to?
There was some chat around the AI, but I think that's
a side conversation.
Yeah, side conversation. Interesting one though.
Great to see it happening though. And yes, anyone who has ideas that they think don't fit into, so these co-design sessions will be quite focused on the particular capabilities. If you have ideas where you're like, this feels like a CDL idea, but it doesn't fit into these capabilities, please drop us a line. We are limited in what we can do, and certainly at the moment, our resources, so our our investment is tied up in this current round of projects. But we are going to continue as ARDC to develop infrastructure. And so we are planning already what the next round might look like. So while we don't have any, we don't have a fixed budget or a timeline for that yet, we are always looking at what will happen next. So if you have ideas, please reach out to us. We won't be able to do everything, and we won't be able to follow up on every conversation immediately. But knowing what is possible and what people need is really important for us to make those plans. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions. So unless anything else comes up, we might end there. As you'll have been seeing on your screen for a while, just a quick plug for International Data Week that the ARDC will be hosting in Brisbane in October. Please take a look and come and join us there. But yeah, we really look forward to seeing you all at our co-design workshops over the next month or so. I'm really excited to get the input that we need to produce some really